Hello, everyone. Happy Thursday night. Welcome to the House of College Hoops. I'm Sam Basil, joined alongside a great crew today of Will Tondo, Jake Zimmer, and as always, he's been on pretty much every live stream we've been doing all March, Michael DeRosa. DeRosa, sources have said that every time it's time for us to do a podcast, you emerge out of a cryogenic chamber and then return to it as soon as every live broadcast is over. Do you care to address those rumors?
Yeah, they're 100% true, and it's pretty cool in there. And I have no further comments other than that. It's the life. I'd recommend it.
DeRosa has been killing it. My man is always on the streams, always tweeting, always providing the reactions, always writing. I see this man everywhere.
Stay ready, so you ain't got to get ready. You know what I'm saying?
But you have to.
Looking for his Winter Soldier sleeper activation words. It's Hinkle Hoya Saxa. So,
that's very creative.
You need a podcast guest. Just utter those into the ether. But let's actually get into our show here. We've got a pretty stacked show because it is possibly one of the greatest weekends of the year, championship weekend. The reason why we're coming on here at kind of a random time, 9:21, is because we just finished watching an excellent NIT championship game. Seton Hall finished the job against Indiana State in a really close one, came down to the wire at Hinkle Fieldhouse. Tough way to end the season for the Sycamores, but I think the way that they built this season and kind of became the darling of the NIT this year. Everyone was really behind them after it really felt like they got snubbed from this year's NCAA tournament. It was great to see them kind of finish out on that run. And now we'll see what the future holds for them, with Coach Schertz and everything going on. Will he take another job? Will he stay one more year? It feels like a lot of people are campaigning for him to stay one more year, but we'll see. For those,
if I could just give a shout out to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, is that what they're calling him?
Bobby Avila.
Holy shit, this guy has had I feel like everybody's kind of just laughing him off as one of these guys that just exists on one of these teams. He's got over almost 22 points a game this year. So this dude was a huge reason for why the Sycamores even got to where they were. Sycamores finished 32-7, if my math is right. So they had a fantastic year. Probably should have been a tournament team. We won't go down that rabbit hole, but what a hell of a game. That's the best NIT title game that I can remember in recent memory.
Yeah, he finished tonight with 13 points, 2 for 6 from the 3-point line. Just an overall solid game. But for a lot of you people who are watching, you were probably college basketball diehard, so you were also watching that game. If you're a college basketball sicko, you've also probably watched 2 other tournament championship games this year, with Seattle winning the CBI, Norfolk State winning the CIT, and then you also probably watched the game earlier today, Illinois taking down Villanova 71-57 in the women's basketball invitational tournament championship game. And that's just the start. We've got 7 more games this weekend. So before we get into it, let's run through the rest of this weekend slate. Tomorrow, huge one, the women's Final Four. South Carolina taking on North Carolina State at 7 p.m. And then UConn taking on Caitlin Clark's Iowa at 9:30. That's going to be an excellent match. We're going to get into that in a little bit. Then on Saturday, starting off in the afternoon, we've got the women's NIT championship where Minnesota is facing off against St. Louis. And that's going to roll us right into the men's Final Four at 6:09 with NC State taking on Purdue. Then at 8:49, we've got UConn versus Alabama. Then on Sunday at 3 p.m., we've got the women's national championship game, all culminating, finishing off in Arizona with the men's national championship at 9:20 on Monday. We're all going to be sad Tuesday morning because there's not going to be a lot of basketball left to watch. But, I mean, we are feasting this weekend. So let's kind of start it off. I want to start off with an interesting story before we get into some of our game picks that I feel like really pertains to a lot of us at the House of College Hoops, especially our guys at Road to the Garden. And it's the announcement of a tournament that's happening starting in 2025 known as the College Basketball Crown. This was announced by, as a joint venture between Fox Sports, 8, the Big Ten, the Big East, and the Big 12. Essentially, what it's going to be is it's going to be a new college basketball invitational tournament in the postseason. It's going to be conducted mainly really truncated in late March. 16 teams in Las Vegas, and those 3 conferences that we mentioned, the Big East, the Big 10, the Big 12, are all each going to get 2 automatic bids. So probably the 2 best teams they can get that don't want to be in the NCAA tournament or the NIT will make this tournament. I feel like it was a little bit controversial. I feel like a lot of people had strong feelings about this announcement, specifically in how this new tournament and its strong ties to power conferences will affect future NIT fields. I just wanted to ask you guys, do we feel like this puts the NIT in a little bit of trouble here, or do we think it's a little bit more benign than some people are making it out to be?
So I'm going to be a little confused on this because obviously I'm looking at the dates and they're saying, March 31st until April 6th. So if a team makes the big tournament, are they not eligible for this tournament?
Correct. Yeah.
Yes.
You're talking about if the team makes March Madness, you're saying they cannot compete in this tournament. Yes.
And so they have to choose between the NIT or the Crown.
That's what it sounds like.
Actually, it would be interesting if instead of this dumb bullshit, choose the NIT or whatever the fuck this thing is called, they actually just took teams that lost the first weekend and just kind of gave them another turn. That would be kind of interesting.
That would be cool.
This sucks.
Cooking with fire.
Who cares about this?
And there is precedent for that. There were years where mid-major teams, when the NCAA tournament in the early 90s, before it was really, a lot of people, obviously the modern iteration of the NCAA tournament people attribute to, the early 80s, but there were teams in the late 80s, early 90s that would lose play-in games in the NCAA tournament and then still go to the NIT because they wanted to keep playing basketball. Nothing in this press release really said anything about that being a possibility, but DeRosa, as you laid it out, and Tondo, as you laid it out, it could work. I mean, but again, it's one of those things where I don't know if a team will want to do that. If St. John's is already refusing the NIT, what would make them want to wait 2 weeks and then come out of a long break and then join this tournament?
I have 3 positives out of this. I don't know what my full opinions yet, but my 3 positives would be: 1, it's more basketball to watch, so that's obviously cool. 2, if this is what they're putting in place instead of expanding the actual tournament, I'm okay with that.
Yep.
3, if it's actually teams that are ready to compete, I'm okay with it because, and again, it all depends on what these players are being incentivized to join this tournament and what programs are being incentivized to join this tournament. It prolongs the transfer portal. Because right now, I hate the fact that the transfer portal is hot and these teams are already picking best players from mid-majors and teams are getting absolutely gutted when we still have basketball to watch. Like, the season isn't over. So it's either they need to change the transfer portal window to start, April 10th, or have these teams be able to be in it for the long run, and we don't have these total landscapes absolutely changing. So those are my 3 positives.
I'm nailing the head, Tondo. I think here's my thought. It's like we've seen how bad the portal has got already these past couple of weeks. So I can agree that I am a portal needs to be fixed kind of guy, right? Like, I agree with all these takes that you shrink the 45-day transfer window or whatever it is. You just make it 30 days or whatever, and you start it the Tuesday after at midnight after the championship game. I'm one of those people. That being said, I'm also pro if you're selected for the NIT, play in it. So that's why I didn't like St. John's backing out. I didn't like Indiana backing out. That's fundamentally my stance there.
Yeah,
Putting
I think
all that
that's all.
aside,
Sorry.
putting all that aside, I mean, Will makes a good point. We've got 30 or 15 days. This would have been this year. March 16th, the conference tournaments wrap up. Tournament starts on March 31st. How many guys have hit the portal already? Hundreds, if not even, the high hundreds. So how are these rosters going to look? I mean, we're diving real deep into the freaking dumpster. Providence was in the first round of the NIT. They chose to bench Devin Carter because he's sort of nursing an ankle injury. He wants to be a lottery pick in the NBA draft. That was one of the more conservative teams in the NIT. They just benched one guy. You've got teams that go into the final rounds that are not using their full rosters. This just seems like a recipe for disaster here.
How many people did you say have entered the transfer portal?
I said high hundreds, if not thousands, potentially.
Over 900, according to The Athletic, as of yesterday.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
Port's popping off.
Yeah, I think I've wrestled with this tournament proposal for the past 24 hours, and I think as somebody who is, thank you, Peyton, our
comment from
resident
Peyton.
Comment hawk. These
coaches that don't make the yeah, you got it, Sam. Go ahead.
These coaches that don't make the big dance got to focus on the portal more than these BS tournaments.
Well, that's what Rick Pitino did, and I haven't seen St. John sign one guy yet.
Yeah, and also there have been
luring guys into the portal. Then they're not, and those guys are just like, wait, we can go somewhere else, and they go somewhere else.
I've also seen players be contacted by teams that were currently in the NIT.
Alabama landed the kid from Pepperdine.
Yeah, that's true.
Commit today.
I'm like,
you were a big tinfoil hat guy, Will, with that. You're like, I don't know. I smell something funny here. The portal opens, and then this guy goes to Alabama from Pepperdine.
Before they even played their game yet. It's like, Nate Oates, you got to be, I know basketball is more than just the head coach and stuff like that, but you got to be focusing on the game plan. And clearly he was, because they're in the Final Four. But they landed a transfer before March Madness even kicked off. I go, is this guy going to get a bench spot? Does he get gear right off the bat? What's his NIL looking like? It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point. And I think it's one of those things where, along with this tournament, I think we just have to have patience for it. I think we, as someone who is a fan of the NIT, I love the NIT, and I still think it is really important. I had like an almost 2,000 word article on House Enterprise this week about it, specifically with Indiana State. At the same time, again, like you said, Will, this could do things like curb NCAA tournament expansion. We could keep the field at 68. This could keep allow good teams to have more opportunities to play. In the NIT, it could give more good mid-major teams opportunities to play. And it's a little bit cocky at this point to be labeling this tournament as the NIT killer. I mean, look at all these other tournaments that go on that don't draw the attention away from the NIT. Look what happened with the Vegas 16. They were not even able to get 16 teams that one year, right? So I think we should just let it happen. Let's see what goes on, and I'm ready to keep an open mind about it. I really wanted to talk about that. Thank you for indulging me on that. So let's get into our thoughts on the men's and women's Final Four. Since the women's are going on Friday, they're coming up first. Let's talk about them first. And this first game between NC State and South Carolina. NC State, obviously, they are one of two programs around the country that are having a team in the men's and women's Final Four. A fantastic run by both Wolfpack teams. Guys, what are your thoughts on, just your initial thoughts on this game?
Finally, we're talking about real fucking games. Holy shit. Thank God. Yeah, I don't really have deep thoughts on this other than South Carolina is probably the best team in women's hoops. It's going to take a huge effort to beat them. NC State, this is a thanks for coming out game. I got South Carolina by TKO.
Yeah, and I'm sort of right with you, Mike. It's at this point, is this in a weird way a Dawn Staley legacy game, right? She's got 2 rings on her finger already, right? She's going to go down as one of the more successful coaches, but I'm talking about Dawn Staley for her to go in the, the Pat Summitt and Gino and Muffet McGraw lore, right? This a third ring could be, and actually a third ring in 7 years too. That could be the ultimate lift for her legacy, and I think that's a big storyline coming into this game.
I don't know. Don't sleep on Westmore and these Wolfpack though, because if NC State wins, I'm taking NC State over Purdue. I'm a Narrative Nation guy. I'm getting both Wolfpacks, and that means UConn's taking the clean sweep, and Paige is going to upset freaking Caitlin Clark in a stunner and show that UConn's still here to play. I'm going Narrative Nation, and I think the NCAA needs some good press right now after the whole debacle with the Plains. That if you get an NC State UConn double matchup with men's and women's, that is.
I think America would just blow up.
Well, you talk about controversy with the Plains. I mean, let's get into the women's tournament as well. I mean, the controversies where they played a game in, I believe it was Portland, right, where they didn't even have matching 3-point lines.
How do you? How do you
that's ridiculous.
That shit is insane. And they elected after, I think it was halftime that the coaches went out and they've had measuring tapes and stuff, and they just said, screw it. I mean, one of us played on this before, the other is going to play on it afterwards. So it's nuts. I don't know how you screw that up. How do professionals in facilities screw that up? It's embarrassing. And Peyton Burton commenting behind the scenes, that is laughable. I agree, Peyton. That's a real laughable situation here. You want more eyes on this women's game. They've had a historic year, and this is probably the best storyline year of women's basketball that you could imagine. I mean, Caitlin Clark getting snubbed by Gino, and now it's sort of revenge time. She's also one of the best women's college players to ever play the game. You've got Staley, this big one for her. This could be her third ring. UConn's revenge as well with all their injuries. And then you have 3-point lines that aren't squared up. I mean, that is unacceptable and it's ridiculous.
Yeah, absolutely. So going into this one, do we feel like this is going to be a little bit, this is kind of the one that we can just go, yeah, South Carolina is going to take this one?
I'm taking the underdog.
37.
Right.
I'm taking the underdog. I will say though, in terms of just I thought last week, obviously, one of the most watched games in all of sports in Iowa and LSU should have been a championship type of performance. I think people are sleeping on this Iowa UConn matchup as another must-watch performance too. To get those back to back, I mean, if Caitlin Clark is truthfully, and again, she is an incredible talent. There's no doubting that, but the path of LSU, UConn, and then potentially South Carolina is one heck of a run. And I don't hear Iowa and her complaining.
Yeah. That sentiment was kind of interesting to me because I watched that game on Monday night. It was a fantastic game. And I was glad to see how record breaking in terms of viewership that game had. But I was really confused at all the people that went, all right, that's the game. That's the one to watch. And it's like, all right, but now we got Iowa UConn, and then we've got we've got a potential for Iowa UConn into Iowa South Carolina or Iowa UConn into UConn South Carolina. That is 3 straight rounds of top tier programs in what should be, a historic final women's tournament weekend. Why stop there? Why stop at the the national championship game? Why not carry this momentum that we're building in women's college basketball into the WNBA? I keep seeing, and I understand these arguments right now with, how the money is in terms of NIL, but I keep seeing people talk about, oh, well, maybe it's just better for some of these players to use those extra years because the money that they're making in NIL is not going to be comparable to the money that they're going to make in their first couple of years in the WNBA. And it bothers me because I feel like a lot of people are telling on themselves saying, well, it's the money's not going to be there because my viewership's not going to be there. I'm just going to watch the college game, and then I'm not going to follow these great players as a viewer into the WNBA. If you're really that adamant about watching college basketball and not watching, pro basketball, fine. But why? Just why? DeRosa, it looks like you had something to say.
Yeah. So first of all, I don't watch a lick of the NBA, so I guess I am adamant about it in that sense.
Yeah.
But I think people are kind of telling on themselves because do we think Caitlin Clark's just gonna lose the State Farm ad? She's like, she just goes pro and they're just like, all right, see ya.
Yeah.
Fuck you. Like that's just not gonna happen. It's foolish to me. It's based on a fallacy.
I think it is crazy though that this arguably, and again, it could be because of NIL, it could be because there's more coverage on the sport. What a loaded class of college basketball players on the women's field this year specifically. I mean, it's like Caitlin Clark, Cameron Brink, Paige Buchers, Elisa Peely out of Utah, Juju Watkins at USC.
What about Angel Reese? Too?
Angel
Like,
Reese.
he's
Yeah.
reinvented this whole space.
LSU as a whole has a lot of great players. Elia Edwards on UConn. It's like such a loaded class of ballers that I don't think it gets enough credit. And again, I watch more women's college basketball than I do WNBA, and the WNBA has a lot of talent. But it's like we really took advantage or took for granted this year of the sport because it was much watched TV, compared to, and again, it might just because of we're in the college basketball sphere more than the professional sphere that it's more in our face that we have the opportunities to watch it. But there was a lot of talented games and players and coaches and that, we definitely did not get to experience enough, I would say.
Yeah, Tondo, I think it's totally fair to admit that, and I think there are a lot of people that are in the same boat as you. What I'm saying is now it's time for us to change that, right? It's like, all right, now let's follow this class into the professional women's game. Let's follow them so that we can increase this viewership and we can make sure that this opportunity, this question of, oh, is it worth it more for me, like monetarily, to stay another year? It's where I go, the money will follow.
The tough part about the WNBA though is, there's not enough teams and not enough spots on rosters that, again, you're going to have a talented class like this year coming into the WNBA that there's a chance that next year or a year after a first round pick gets waived because there is not that many spots to play. And we saw that in years past, which is crazy. That again, this is supposed to be the pinnacle of women's sports or women's basketball, should be the WNBA. And there's not enough teams and rosters that now you're getting all of these talented players that someone will probably be homeless, or these great players that you have currently now are going to get cut off because, the money isn't there or there's not enough roster spots. It's a broken model right now.
Yeah, it's a great point. And that, the only thing I can really say to that is we I don't think it's not like our responsibility to, shell out the money for a WNBA expansion team. But what I'm saying is, we can help mitigate that, you know what I mean? Just by continuing to watch. I was talking about this with one of my friends recently. And another thing is like, these players, this class is loaded, right? But that doesn't mean that, Caitlin Clark's going to come into the WNBA and immediately win MVP as a rookie and then win a championship with, presumably Indiana, right? Obviously a possibility. We've seen it happen. We've seen players get close to that in the NBA and the WNBA, but, LeBron didn't make the playoffs until his third or fourth year in the league. Like, we just got to let these, we got to let things build naturally. So that was just kind of my 2 cents on it. But
by the way, on the ticket price topic too, just of general games, I'm sure you people have seen this, but Caitlin Clark supposed to, and Peyton makes a good point too. That is indeed correct. In Cleveland, the Final Four prices are going around $700, $800. You compare it to men's, we're around $400 or $500. So that's interesting too. I think on the Indiana Fever ticket prices, Indiana Fever hold draft pick number 1. Presumably Caitlin Clark, get-in price for their home openers $250.
Bro, what?
Because, yeah.
Damn.
Yep.
Good for them.
Get-in price on the road at Mohegan Sun a couple weeks before is around $80. Still, I mean, that's a real good shout for a WNBA game. Caitlin Clark's going to come in here to Connecticut, and this is a region of the world a region of the nation that has really good women's basketball backing here. Peyton Burton's going to watch Caitlin Clark play at Indiana multiple times, he says.
Yeah, again, a great point. The demand is there, and the demand will continue to grow. So let's get into before we get into comparing WNBA ticket prices for all of our markets here. I'm very interested to see what it's like when the Fever come to Brooklyn to play the Liberty. But before we get into that, let's talk about this other Final Four game, which is obviously Caitlin Clark's Iowa versus Paige Bueckers' UConn. There was, I think, one of the really interesting narratives, obviously, is Caitlin Clark's relationship with UConn, and the fact that she talked about how they didn't really give her as strong of a look as she wanted to. She grew up a big fan. There was that comment from Coach Gino that was basically saying, like, I don't believe she's the best player in the country right now. I firmly believe it's Paige Bueckers. All certain things. I really don't think that was I don't think he was trying to diminish her game or anything. But I mean, I think he was just standing by his player in that sense. But regardless, I think these are all things that are going to set up a fantastic second semifinal game. Jake, starting off with you, what are your thoughts on how this one is going to go down?
Yeah, look, I would be a liar if I told you I watched a lot of Iowa basketball this year. Clark has had a monumentous year in every way possible. I mean, now she's in lore of probably the best women's college basketball player of all time. I look at the UConn teams of old, right? And this UConn program hasn't won a national title it's been 8 years by my count. They struck out against South Carolina a couple years ago. In 2022, South Carolina just took them to the freaking woodshed. I remember that game, and it was not competitive. Ryan Ruocco, who's calling that game on ESPN, mentioned it multiple times. He's like, this is just total South Carolina domination right now. But something just magical about this UConn team this year. They had historic amounts of injuries to very prominent players. I mean, Caroline Ducharme, right? She was one that had hip surgery, right? They had a freshman, Yana El-Alfi, who had an Achilles tendon. Ozzie Fudd, who was one of the probably I don't know what she was this year, but perennial preseason all Big East first team contender at least. She goes down with a knee injury, and at its face value, it's like, well, shit, what is this UConn team going to be? Paige Bueckers is maybe not fully healthy from her knee injury last year. What is it going to be? They've impressed, man. They've impressed this whole year. Their last loss was to South Carolina in February this year. Here's what I think is going to happen. I think UConn's going to upset Iowa. I really fully believe that. I think they've got enough experience and they've got enough chemistry right now that they're playing with. I mean, this reminds me of the teams of old with like Elena Delle Donne and all this stuff, right? Where they've just got this competitive edge to them, even like Rebecca Lobo days for UConn, right? I mean, they've just got this edge, right? And to me, this is it's very hard to beat a team three times. I say this about, every other bracket challenge we do or any other matchup. I said it about UMass Lowell and Bryan. I was wrong that time, but I really do think we're going to set ourselves up for a UConn South Carolina game that's going to be much closer than you might think it is. I really just believe UConn's got that magic this year.
Yeah, great point. I feel like one of the big things, and this is kind of going back to what Coach Auriemma said with Paige Bueckers, right? People have been, very deservedly so, talking about Caitlin Clark and, by the numbers, by the, just the way that, she just draws these crowds, just the way that she comes in with this incredible intensity in every single game, whether it's UConn or Holy Cross, right? People are pretty much ready to say that she's the best player in the history of women's college basketball. A couple of years ago, I feel like they weren't obviously ready to say it because she only had 1 or 2 seasons under her belt, but people were ready to say that by the end of her career, Paige Beckers could be one of the best players in the history of college basketball. She obviously sat out this last the 2022-23 season due to injury, so she lost a lot of time to catch up to Caitlin in numbers and potentially in a Final Four appearance, right? Is that another kind of just match for like letting the fire under UConn to win this game, right? Is this Paige Beckers like kind of a legacy game to say, hey, you know what? Caitlin Clark has all this, but at the end of the day, I beat her.
I think there's an element of that with Beckers. I think it seems to be less of like the personal accomplishment and more of, hey, UConn has to defend one of the best college basketball players ever on their side, Breanna Stewart. All right, she's got 4 rings. She won the Final Four Most Outstanding Player 4 times. I just looked it up. 151-5 career record. I mean, she was. I don't even think it was close. She was the best paint player UConn has ever had. I'll make that claim. I think there are other players, Diana Taurasi, all that stuff. They were great shooters, lights out. But I mean, she was probably the best forward that the Big East, maybe even the nation has ever seen, right? So I think I don't know that it's something that you'll ever hear Gino say like, hey, she's gonna be, it's us versus them, and and Paige has to beat Iowa to get over this hump. I just think it's more about, like, hey, the prestige of this program is not at stake, but it's coming into question again. Right? Gino goes into his 40th year. This stuff comes up. People are saying, hey, is it time for Gino to hang it up? Does he have the juice left in him anymore? And I think it's more about that team than it will ever be about a Paige Beckers trying to get on the national stage again.
Yeah.
I mean, he's in a little bit of a dry spell. Hasn't won it since 2017. So
years.
That's very unlike him. 11 championships. He needs that 12th. But no, I mean, going back to the Paige Buchers point, it's like, in 2021, she was what Caitlin Clark is now. People were all eyes on her and everyone was talking about her. AP Player of the Year, Naismith, National Player, John Wooden, All-American. And it was her league and her story, and injuries obviously, hindered that. But I think it'll be an all-time matchup. We thought LSU was great. I think this one's going to be even better.
Yeah. So let's kind of go around the horn here. Final thoughts. National championship game. Who's beating who on Sunday? Jake.
I think UConn's going to beat South Carolina. I think it's going to be very close. I think this might go to overtime, but maybe UConn by 1 or 2. Just South Carolina won't beat them 3 times, and I think they're 2-0 their last 2 against them, spanning a couple years, but not going to happen 3 times.
All right, DeRosa, what you got for us, sir?
Yeah, I'll be the Stan. I'll ride the best player in the game. I'll take Caitlin Clark over Iowa. I mean, over South Carolina. Excuse me. Yeah,
gonna suit up for NC State.
No, just talking about this game real quick. Just because I didn't get my chance to speak, and I'm selfish enough, I need to speak out. Just looking at like the way these teams match up, both teams are going to go like 6-7 deep in UConn and Iowa. Like now, the team goes particularly deep into the bench. UConn more so at a necessity. But just one thing I looked at is both these teams got out rebounded on the offensive glass in both of their games. Like we saw, Angel Reese had 10 offensive rebounds. Angel Reese had 10 offensive rebounds compared to Iowa's a team at 6, and 3 of those offensive rebounds were team rebounds where LSU just hit it out of bounds. So I think the battle on the glass will be kind of even. I think it's really kind of even, and then it comes down to just the best player on the floor. I think is Caitlin Clark, and you're going to need some of the other Iowa girls like Gabby Marshall, Kate Martin, Cynia Fulter, whoever to produce, but I got the best player on the floor. Her name's Caitlin Clark, and I don't want to get in her way, and you guys will. And if she wins the whole thing, you guys will look foolish, and I'll look smart, and that's really what matters. And if
That's
it doesn't,
fair.
I bought into the hype. So what? She's coming to Indy.
So Iowa over who in the championship?
South Carolina.
South
South
Carolina.
Carolina is going to, South Carolina.
All right, Tondo, what you got for us?
Narrative Nation, I think UConn beats Iowa in overtime. Caitlin Clark still has like 40-something points, but it's going to be an overtime win. And I think UConn will then steamroll NC State. They take the upset on the other end.
I got to go chalky here. I'm gonna go Iowa over South Carolina.
I think honestly, both Final Fours is going to be a chalk play of Iowa and South Carolina, then Purdue, UConn. I think it's just going to be straight chalk.
Yeah, it's no matter what. I mean, these last 3 women's games are must watch. So definitely keep an eye out for them. Clear out your schedules on Friday and Sunday. But yeah. So before we get into the men's Final Four, I would like to take a little bit of time to talk about today's podcast sponsor, and that is our friends over at Rhythm. You already know March is filled with unpredictability and thrilling upsets. But what if AI could help you navigate the chaos and win some bets? Enter Rhythm, the AI sports betting app for player props and game picks. Rhythm stands at the forefront of innovation, offering sports enthusiasts a cutting-edge tool to elevate their college basketball betting experience. The app leverages data sets, historical trends, player statistics, and more to help craft the perfect picks for you. If you head to the link in our bio and on house-enterprise.com, don't forget that dash, you can sign up for free to find a set of picks perfectly tailored for you to conquer March. Filter Rhythm suggestions by teams, props, and more to help create the perfect picks that fit your play style and your fandom. Download Rhythm, that's spelled RITHMM. Create your account, find your perfect picks, and win big. Important disclaimer, House, Enterprise, and Rhythm are not responsible for any lost wages on picks you make. Please gamble responsibly. Gambling problem? Please call 1-800-GAMBLER. Thank you again to our friends at Rhythm. They've been supplying us with some really great picks all throughout the month of March.
Hey, Rhythm's AI model, by the way, successfully picked NC State to make a Final Four run in quite a bit. So that's you value some of the stuff that that model did, and you're sitting pretty right now in your bracket.
Yeah. So speaking of NC State, they are going to be opening this weekend's men's Final Four against Purdue. I feel like one of the biggest narratives going into this week's Final Four is: are we entering, or are we well into the renaissance of the big man? It feels like at least 3 out of these 4 Final Four teams have had, a sizable forward that's dominated each of their conference tournament and NCAA tournament runs. How do we feel like DJ Burns is going to match up against Zach Edey in this year's first national semifinal game? Starting off with you, Jake.
Anyone can challenge me on this if you think differently. I think it's going to be nightmarish for DJ Burns. I just can't say with certainty that I like any of the matchups that he's had to prove that he can go against Zach Edey and just carve him apart. I mean, you saw what Edey did last game against Tennessee. I mean, he was having an easy time. And granted, like Dalton Connect and a lot of the guards were going to the paint quite frequently, and Edey was just swatting guys left and right. He's collecting boards offensively and defensively. But, I'm not too impressed with, this is not a slight on DJ Burns' game. I mean, he was an incredible player this year for them. He was an incredible player at Winthrop, but I just don't know. This to me is where this run ends for NC State. I mean, you've got your prominent big guy featured against the best big guy in the nation that eliminates one of your biggest strengths. So that's what's keeping me hung up on this matchup here.
Yeah, that matchup's going to be really interesting. Specifically, something I want to ask you about, DeRosa, in that one quote that really caught my eye in today's media availability was Coach Painter talking about Zach Edey, and specifically one thing that he does on offense that's really, really crucial as a big man, especially as a big man that's as talented as he is, in how he really takes advantage of teams, just trying to stop him at all costs. Like, he'll set a screen, he'll make a roll, and then he'll move inside and then kind of draw like that extra zone double team coverage, which ends up, just by the way he positions his body in the paint and on the floor, it gives his guards so much room to work, find inside lanes. obviously, that's something that teams know about, but at the end of the day, it's hard to defend no matter what. Michael, how much do you feel like this strategy that Edey uses is going to, play into this semifinal game?
Well, I think it plays big dividends because, not to mention that obviously Zach Edey is the best player on the floor. Purdue's also the best three-point shooting team in the country. And NC State isn't a great three-point shooting team. Like, they just haven't been all season. They've kind of hit some shots, obviously, in the tournament, which is how they've made this run. But they're not like a great three-point shooting team. So the fact that Edey's just going to be able to command a ton of space down low creates real problems for them. And also, I don't think you can really put DJ Burns on Zach Edey. I think you're going to have to put a DGR or a Middlebrooks on him. But what happens when those guys get in foul trouble? Then I just kind of think you're toast, because if Burns gets in foul trouble quickly, that takes away a lot of NC State's offense, because while Middlebrooks has been great in this tournament, he just doesn't provide the same stuff that Burns does offensively. Like Burns, Duke played him one-on-one. Duke lost because they played him one-on-one. Like, he had 29 points. Like, he just kind of cooked poor Filipowski. Not poor Filipowski.
I was going to say, maybe not a great choice of words. Poor Kyle Filipowski.
But yeah, it pays big dividends, and I just think Purdue kind of controls this game. Frankly, then again, I've picked against NC State a lot, and it hasn't gone well. So, what do I know?
Yeah, Tondo, any thoughts on any other interesting matchups that you're looking for in this game?
I mean, again, bigs come in all different shapes and sizes, and we're going to see that with Zach Edey and Burns. But this is pretty much an unstoppable force meets an immovable object right here. And I think all signs point to Purdue to win this. And I wasn't very bullish on Purdue the entire season necessarily. I think Purdue is going to win, but I really want NC State to make the upset. I just love the chaos. I love the storylines. I think this team is just fun and energetic. They took down a Duke team that no one wanted to win. I think they can also take down a Boilermaker team that the country does not want to win as well. But, if you're a gambling man and your AI prediction tells you to go with the Boilermakers, obviously, one, gamble responsibly, and two, that's probably the safe pick.
Yeah. Can I ask though? I've been seeing this a lot, and I understand that you always want to root against the favorite. I think the better team, especially with a team like this NC State team, right? Like the way that they came out of the ACC tournament, they, a lot of people like to say that, they got into this tournament by, a missed Virginia free throw. What about this Purdue team to you guys has given them this villain role? Is it just that they're good? Is it just that people like to root against them because they've had, some pretty unfortunate exits in past years? Or is there something about this team that you guys just want to root against?
I've got a thought. I think besides that, everyone thinks Zach Edey's like, they trash his looks, which, hey, I get it. Like, whatever. You want to trash a guy because he's not the best looking guy on earth? Fine, whatever. But
that's
I think I know it's true. It's awful. I liken this to like how evil empire teams were back in the 2000s of like baseball, like the Yankees. A-Rod always said this. He goes, when I came to the Yankees, it was Goldman Sachs, right? Like we just showed up to work in our briefcases. We approach it the same way. And for Purdue, you look at the player stats, they've played 37 games and their 5 guys have started all 37 of them every time, right? It's just so methodical that you can't stop it. It's not an ugly kind of basketball like Virginia, because Virginia will do that same thing and then they'll just win 50-45 if they do win, or then they'll get blown out on the other side. I think there's shades of that in there, that like this team does the same stuff so well all the time and people hate them for it, right? Which is a respectable take.
I mean, my biggest thing, and I agree with Jake on that point, but I also think too, it's like they were perceived, and it was kind of similar to Houston, as like God's greatest gift this season. It was Purdue and Houston. They are the best teams in the country. And it's like, when you look at their schedule, yes, they have a lot of very solid wins, but like not many of them were necessarily like true quote unquote blowouts. I mean, it gets, you got a 12-point win over Alabama in December. And again, like they did load themselves up on a heavier end, but like the Big Ten wasn't that incredible in my eyes. And yes, they're having a good run now. I just did not see it as like, and again, I don't want to side with Hurley necessarily, because it's like UConn is definitely a team that is uberly talented, and I don't think they got the respect that they necessarily deserved. Throughout the regular season, but everyone was like, oh my God, it's Purdue. Oh my God, like Purdue is the best team ever. Where it's like, they were good, they were great, but I don't think they were like, the best college team that has ever walked. And I don't think Zach Edey's the best college player that has ever played the sport. Like the headlines and the narratives that they were feeding this team, it was like, okay, let's knock them off the pedestal because last year they lost right off the bat.
Yeah. So you feel like you feel a little underwhelmed.
I do.
In this Purdue team. DeRosa, do you feel a little underwhelmed, or do you feel like they're just rolling exactly as how they should be?
Yeah, it feels about really what you could have expected by Purdue. I think the reason some people hate him is one, Zach Edey's tall, like he's really tall, and like it's easy to root against the guy who's 7'15". So that's one part, and the other part is just the fact that he draws so many fouls. Like when you watch the games, he gets fouled 15 times, probably fouls a good 10 times. They call a couple of them both ways, but just the fact that he's always at the free throw line, it's kind of boring watching free throws. Like if I'm ever watching a game like on repeat, like just watching a game back for whatever reason, or just watching a game like afterwards, you always jump past the free throws. So that could be another part of it.
Yeah. Good points all around. Also, thank you again to our 100 live viewers that we've got going on. We've had great viewership all tournament long. Let's keep pushing it into the final weekend of the year. So yeah, I can totally see that. So let's give our final picks here. Does the Purdue Empire prevail against NC State here, Jake?
Yes, this is where NC State's magical run ends, much to my chagrin. I did pick UConn and Purdue in the championship, so I'll be happy about it from a chalk perspective. But NC State, that team was lovable. Casey Morsell had a great year. Diarra looked really good, and then they got some real good bench depth too, especially these past couple of weeks. So NC State had an admirable run. I think it comes to a swift end against Purdue, and I think they take this one.
All right, DeRosa, do you feel like Edey wins it at the line for Purdue?
Everything you said, I agree with. I got Purdue by TKO. I don't think this game's particularly close.
No.
Tondo, are you going to go Narrative Nation to Final Fours in a row?
In a row.
My wallet is going to go Narrative Nation, but my record is going to go Purdue wins.
Good stuff. All right. I think I'm going to stick with Purdue here. I did not have them getting this far. I actually had Tennessee in my Final Four. So, but I think, we've said it. I think DeRosa and I said it when we made our Sweet 16 redo brackets.
That didn't go very well.
Yeah, we kept saying, this is the game that NC State has to, it stops here. It stops here. And I'm going to say it one more time. I feel like it stops here. So I'm going to also go with Purdue. And that's
how can we trust you? How do we trust you, sir?
I don't know.
Look,
Maybe I'm sure.
Sorry to interrupt. I'm looking at some stuff on the side. Totally forgot tonight was College Slam in the 3-point competition.
Yeah,
dude, Tominaga hit a 3 and turned
PC
around.
Tominaga, yeah.
Just took down Boogie Ellis. Who would have
This
thought?
is why this is the best week of the year, right? Like, I mean, think about all this stuff. There's so much stuff that we can't even remember.
Like, shit, the NIT's over. What do we do? And all of a sudden, we just see Tominaga and I see Boo Booey taking shots. I'm like, wait, what the fuck? What's going on?
Yeah,
here?
and the McDonald's All-American game was earlier this week. Like, it's just a celebration of basketball.
Tominaga is such a stud, man. He's just he's so lovable. Like, you look at that guy and you're like, wow, that guy just loves playing basketball in Nebraska. It's unbelievable.
It's fantastic. So we've got our first national championship game participant, and they will be going up against the winner of UConn versus Alabama. UConn, obviously, I feel like the big story around them today was they flew to Arizona a lot later than initially planned. They were probably feeling a little bit tired today. I'm pretty sure the players did not go to media availability today, right? It was just Coach Hurley at media availability. Yeah, I mean, give those guys a rest.
The amount of cries on Twitter about it. Thank God they didn't go to media today.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly.
They're fucking 22 years old. You could sleep whenever. God, I would kill to be 22 again, and you would drink 10 beers and not be hungover. Like,
Yeah, but I
if I
mean,
have to take a red eye and then go to work the next day, I'd be miserable now. They're 22 years old. I'm sorry.
Don't mean to like flex on people. I don't mean to brag, but after the Big East tournament, I got on a train out of NYC, left at 12, got to DC at 6. I flew from DC to Indy at 10 a.m., got here at about noon, and then I did a stream that night. So I don't
Because
want
you're
to
young and youthful. You're
youthful.
youthful. You should
But
do this.
The devil works hard, but DeRosa works harder. I'm tired of these excuses.
And that means the UConn players can go and like say words to people. No,
I'm sorry.
I'm indifferent to media day. Who cares?
yeah, I mean,
It's
look,
like-
they'll find plenty
There's
of
part
time.
of me like I agree with you, Tondo. I'm like, and the other side of it is like, well, I get it. They probably had a miserable day. Like they're focused on this shit. Like whatever, it's media day. They'll answer questions another time.
Like, I get it. It sucks. And if UConn loses, then it's going to be a whole fucking spiel about it. They didn't get
Well,
what
I don't know. Hurley did say, he goes, I don't really give a shit about that stuff. We're happy to be here. He kind of pulled a 180 on everybody who thought he was going to bitch about it at media day
he
today.
couldn't.
Anyway.
He has a good PR guy. He is a good PR guy. Say what was me when you didn't have to travel a lick of bit and saying the NCAA is against you. And now the second there's some adversity, be like, oh, we'll handle it. You know, sicko mode now. Come on. Like,
Hey,
UConn's
shout
gonna
out Bobby
win.
Mullen at UConn though, as director of communications over there. Good, was a huge communications asset at the Big East for a while. He taught him well.
Well, now
UConn's gonna
UConn's
win
got
by
at least
20.
a solid 48 hours to kind of get themselves right.
They'll be fine. Yes.
And they will have to get themselves right against a very, very hot team in the Alabama Crimson Tide. Nate Oates, I think he said something today about, he's like, I swear I had nothing to do with these plane delays. I was not playing, any sabotage games against UConn. But obviously his team and, Coach Oates himself are very excited to be, here in Arizona. Well, not here. I'm in Queens, but they're very excited to be in Arizona. So where do you feel like, aside from some potentially tired Huskies legs, do you feel like Alabama can get an advantage over UConn?
3-point line. That's it.
Yeah.
Chuck them fuckers up. How many threes do you think Alabama has to make to feel like they have a chance? Like if you say Alabama made blank threes, maybe they can win this game. What's your number?
Make or attempt?
Make.
At least 20.
I was going to
Yeah.
say 20. A
I
clean
was going to say
60
17, 18.
Yeah, so
I think
They're
like Mark Sears is going to have to make half of them. Seriously, like he's going to have like a 40-point game to beat them. Because where the hell else is it going to come from? I mean, this is no slight on Alabama. They have a very good squad, and I love what Nate Oates did in the portal this offseason. He added, or the past couple off seasons, I should say. Like Sears came in. That was a huge, huge get. Shout out to Hofstra guy, Aaron Estrada, who's having a really good year, 16.1 points a game. This team can shoot the freaking ball, man, though. This is a real good team heating up at the right time. And that's to your point, Michael, that's the only way. Like if at the bare minimum, it's 18.
Yeah.
Bare minimum, it's 18 threes.
My follow-up question to that, DeRosa, is are you asking that because you think that Alabama watched the tape of UConn versus Illinois? They watched that 30-0 run that the Huskies did over, split over two halves, and are just thinking, well, we're never going to get inside because we're never going to get past Donovan Clingan here.
now we're talking about media day. We're going back to it. Nate Oates actually said, and this is a tweet that I'm reading aloud currently, we can't just give them these big runs that everybody gives up. Can you pull them away from the rim? We can play Grant Nelson at the 5 sometimes if he's making shots, but certainly we aren't just going to drive the ball at Clingan. So they're not just going to drive the ball at Clingan. So they're going to take a ton of threes. So
Yeah.
Believe it or not, driving at Clingan didn't work last game, and I think Alabama knows that it won't work this game.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess the other question here is, how does UConn say Alabama, they're shooting a lot of threes and they're hitting them. They're like 7 for 15 in by halftime. Do you just feed Clingan the entire second half? Where does UConn respond should Alabama not allow a big UConn run? Should they keep it close, which UConn really hasn't encountered at all this tournament?
I say this without any data in front of me, but I feel like UConn has the wherewithal to just fight back that way too. Like I don't think they need to go freak out and say, let's just feed Kling in every possession. They've got a lot of good shooters on this team, and that's why I think it makes them so special. Like Cam Spencer, if you told me he was going to be a major threat for UConn this year, I would have laughed in your face. Like he was good, but I didn't expect him to be like main character B or C at any given point for UConn this year. So you feed him the ball, you draw something up for Newton. I mean, you get Karaban, who's been, when he gets on a streak, he is lights out. Like I think UConn has the luxury of not panicking in that scenario. That's my thought of the matter, because they've got just as good shooters, if not better.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, they do have great shooters. They were 3 for 17 from 3-point range against Illinois. I don't really think that is indicative of how they'll perform from three. Should they have to perform from three? I just think the way that the game was going, they just did not care. But it's still very interesting. I mean, defensively, how can you stop a guy like Clingan? Tanda, you got any thoughts on this?
Well, I was just going to say, it's going to be tough, especially with, Alabama's adjusted defensive efficiency at, 104th in the nation, where UConn is top 5 in both offense and defense. I think the biggest threat that Alabama can necessarily impose on UConn is just their pace of play and tempo. If they play fast and play hard, I'm not saying they can expose UConn in different, necessarily, but they can keep this close. The spread right now is at -12. I mean, UConn has won the past 10 games in a row, the past 10, postseason games in a row by double digits. So that should not be a surprise. I have UConn winning the whole thing. Responsibly, I have money UConn winning the whole thing. I think UConn is also just a far better team on this thing. I cannot imagine a scenario where Alabama, not only upsets, but even I don't think they can come in within single digits at the final score.
All right, so I'm going to lock that in as your pick for this second semifinal. So UConn taking it over Alabama. DeRosa, are you in agreement here?
No, I'm going to take Alabama. I think Alabama has really good shooters. No, I'm kidding. I got you.
I knew you were fucking with us. I knew it.
All right, so you've got
he's broken.
As we approach 130 viewers, live viewers on all platforms, Jake, are you gonna pull a fast one on us, or are you just gonna go with UConn here?
I was at Bad Sons Brewing Company in Derby, Connecticut last week, with Clubfoot Jim, house creator, as well as Conspiracy, another house contributor. And we're getting ready for the UConn game, and I go, Illinois -9 or +9.5 or whatever they were. That's way too much. I get it, UConn's dominant, but that's not going to happen. And shame on me. That's a microcosm of this season. Every time I look, I'm like, damn it, that's just too much. It's just too much. And then what do? They blow it out, right? So I'm not even questioning this right now. UConn's going to win. They're going to cover. Alabama might give them some problems, but this is I feel like we've all watched a lot of college basketball in our lives. This is one of the best UConn teams I've ever seen. The best teams that I've ever seen. I'm not thinking about this one.
Yeah, I'm not thinking about it either. I'm going UConn. I got them to win the whole thing. I'm going to have them win the whole thing over Purdue. But let's hold off on national championship game picks, because we're going to have another great stream for you guys on Monday night to preview the men's national championship game. So stick around for that. For all 135 viewers that are watching right now, thank you so much for getting through this men's and women's Final Four preview. Keep checking us out. Follow us at College Hoops HE on Twitter. Keep checking us out at house-enterprise.com. roadtothegarden.com, where we keep putting out great blogs, great podcasts. We've got another Road to the Garden podcast on the way for you guys before this weekend. And until then, for Will Tondo, Jake Zimmer, Mike DeRosa, I'm Sam Basil. We'll see you guys next time.